Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Advertising Hour with me, Scott Colnut. And my special guest today is Doc Williams, founder of Brand Factory Inc. Doc, thanks so much for taking the time out to speak to me today. This is we've got the topic of today's episode, which you're briefly discussing before, calling "Finding Your Voice." And just to give you some context about kind of why I wanted to cover this topic with you in particular. I mean, I've been recording loads of podcasts this week, and I've been talking to lead generation specialists, and the topic of authenticity and being organic keeps coming up in conversations. So, and I find that alone is such a broad topic, and a fascinating topic. And it's like skimming the surface, and I haven't quite got to the root with several guests and even myself about what that really means. And so then when I was looking through your content and finding out more about what you do, and I'm sure we're going to find out so much more in this episode, you seem to have got to, one of your specialisms seems to be getting to the root of what people's ambitions are, what their visions are, and then really, number one, drawing that information out of them in a way that is authentic, and then they can turn into messaging and a business plan. Is that a fair summary of what you do? I know that's a really. I know that.
That was great. No, I love it. That's what I do, man. It really does. Just we're trying to distill down what the essence of the person is, that brand, and then from everything from there transpires from finding that out. So it's that pursuit. It's not easy to do, but I love doing it. It's just everything.
Yeah, you're right. It's the pursuit of the brand, or the pursuit of the voice. It's that whole journey you have to go through, and it can't really be superficial. And this is credit to you in your video content in particular. That comes across. So your authenticity comes across to me. It's one of the reasons that I was so keen to kind of speak with you, is because that came across to me, and I just got the sense, this guy is someone who I can speak to on this topic. And I think I think you probably in your career, which we're going to speak about, it's a storied and interesting career. You've gone through kind of many different journeys, have been through probably a lot of self-analysis and done this kind of work on yourself, which makes it all the more easier to then apply to other people and their businesses.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to say like, oh yeah, it's so easy. I really think, I do enjoy it, and thank you. I'm glad that it comes across that way. I like video a lot. I find that that's where I can show my true voice, and I think different mediums lend to different types of people and their personalities. But I think I like doing that. I like exploring the topic with different people and finding that what resonates with them, and I just think that having an industry, having entertainment and all these other industries, I feel like they just beat that out of you. Like they don't want you to do that. So for a while, I would love to say, yeah, I've always been doing it like this. If you've seen some of my older content, my voice was not always like this, because I always got counsel from either my managers or others that would be like, no, you've got to do it this way. And then, eventually I was just like, you know what? I just honestly think you're wrong. And then I'm going to go into a different direction. And that's when it paid off.
Yeah. Just the concept of format, you just said, as you were talking, that you kind of video is a medium that you're quite kind of comfortable with. Is there any particular reason for that, why that resonates with you more than anything?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. A couple things. Well, my even though I was a writer for a second, writing is really hard for me. It takes me a long time, and I was exploring this concept. I think a couple of months ago, and I was having a conversation. I was on another podcast. I guess I never really thought about it this way, but in my past jobs, I was a DJ, and I just love live, like everything going live. And I love being in the moment. In live streaming, in video, I love creating something out of chaos and something you can't control. And I don't like things that's really polished. Like been on shows and everything where you got to do like 100 takes. I just don't like it. I like imperfection. I like just showing the personality. And I just like doing it. Another thing is too, I think it also comes across. I'm severely dyslexic, so when I have to read a prompt or I had to read a teleprompter, I have to do 100 takes, or I basically have to memorize most of it, and then I'm just looking at keywords because I can't read groupings of words from teleprompters or from scripts most of the time. So live streaming, I kind of know where the outline is. I know where it's going to head. I kind of know what's going to happen, and then the rest is
Mm.
pretty much natural. So it's kind of like a mixture of I think my personality and then just my reading disabilities, pretty much.
That's interesting. I mean, there is something about. I was thinking a lot about this, because, and we'll probably cover it. Although the episode isn't primarily about this, I know that you've been doing a lot in the world of the live streaming, and I suspected that would come up in conversation. But yeah, there's something. I mean, I think that's the reason why I'm enjoying podcasting so much. And I've recently taken over as host of another popular podcast, and it's. I mean, I'm the same. I don't particularly like things that are polished, and sometimes I look at myself and wonder if that's because I'm lazy. Like, is it that I just? It's something I struggle with a lot. Actually, is it because I'm too lazy to do, extensive research or extensive editing or production and so forth, or is it just because that's what I enjoy, and so I want to keep the momentum and keep doing it? And I don't know. Maybe I haven't yet found the answer, but I know that I'm enjoying this, and so I'm keeping. I guess in the moment, if I'm enjoying it, that's what I want to continue to do. I worry that somewhere down the line I might look back and think, oh, I wish I would have done a whole series on that topic, or I guess that's a miserable way to live, isn't it? If you're always thinking about what if.
Yeah, yeah.
But with podcasting, with live streaming, it's the not knowing the direction something might go in is exciting. And again, we were just talking before I pressed record, and I was saying that I like having an outline for a show if I'm talking to someone, but actually some of the most exciting moments are when I stumble across something that's a topic that's really interesting and intrigues me. It's that curiosity. And actually, I mean, we're speaking from the perspective of, I guess, hosts or presenters, but just taking myself out of the equation and thinking myself as a consumer, I love a lot of live stream content for that reason as well. Just not knowing where it's exactly going to go, I quite enjoy that.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but I mean, I think that's really important for people to understand. Like, just look at what you're interested in. If you like consuming that type of content, then try to reverse engineer, like, why do you like that type of content? And I've always liked documentaries. I've always liked just reality TV, and for different reasons, for different types. But I just always loved that pursuit of just like documentaries. I love that unpolished look, the shaky cam of it's real. It feels real, and I like people showing their true personality, and then you can gravitate towards that, because I think when it's buttoned up or it's not totally them, you lose a lot of it. And so, yeah, I that's why in live streaming on whatever platform, it's nothing like it. And I think that's why, because it's live, it's not pre-recorded. I think that's intriguing to people, but also because they're not. The lighting's not right. The angles aren't always right. Everything's going awry, perhaps. I think it's. I don't know. I think it's almost like maybe watching a car crash. Maybe I think everyone's like, you're just waiting for something to happen. Like, you've got to see it. I mean, I do not like this. This rapper just got out of prison, but like his live stream, I think his live stream right when he got out of prison.
Oh, you're talking about Tekashi 6ix9ine, right?
Yeah, and it was like what, 1.5 million.
Yeah, I was just talking to my friend about it. It was 2 million. It was the highest number of live viewers on Instagram today.
Yeah, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, he's swinging what was it? His cuffs. He's singing "Bad Boys," and it's just him. Like his girlfriend's just putting like jewelry on him, and it's just him and his like. And if you hate him, you've got to watch it. If you love him, people are flooding it. Like, it's insane. And my wife does not care whatsoever, but like she watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
She like
I,
I showed her his videos to her, and she's like, "Yeah, whatever." But the live stream, she's like, she wouldn't stop. She watched the whole thing, so it's interesting.
I'm in the same boat. I was one of the 2 million, and I watched the whole thing, and I don't care for him at all. I hate it. I hate his music. But yeah, I mean that's what's so crazy. It's such an addiction. It is addicting watching. I'm fortunate. I managed to have enough self discipline myself to not constantly be on live stream. If I kind of check into Instagram or check into, I mean, I'm mostly on Instagram, not necessarily Facebook as much, and but I log in and there's someone, whether it's a podcast or musician or something, and they're live streaming. I can't help but click on and then watch. And sometimes I won't even be paying attention, and I'll just be having I'll have the live stream on whilst doing work, just in case anything happens, so I don't miss out on it, which is crazy. It's so stupid. I feel silly for saying it out loud. There's something really interesting that I was just thinking about from your perspective in video, and that's live. You've been talking about your career and going back to your career, and I know there's a lot, so we won't get to go through it all, but you've had the experience of working at ESPN, which I assume is the more polished, the kind of I don't know, you'll be able to tell me, but I'd assume that's a little bit more polished. And then on the flip side of that, I know you've got some kind of connection to VaynerMedia as well, which I remember seeing somewhere on your website. That's right, isn't it? And they're two very different approaches to video content and how things are produced. So you have had, I assume, experience of both sides of that.
Yeah, I mean, I started with ESPN writing, and then I wanted to be like, I was a beat reporter for CrossFit for everything with ESPN, and then I wanted to go into basketball, and I thought I wanted to be a sideline reporter, and so I did a sideline report for my first time for a WNBA game, and I was doing it before the game and everything like that. And it was polished. Everything looked good. But when I first got started, I thought that I could just be like, I'm pretty chill. I mean, I sometimes, like, if I'm excited about something, you'll hear me like really, my voice will really change. But for the most part, I'm really chill. And I didn't understand the showmanship of doing the interview and what it really took, because I was really professional. I was in a suit. I was breaking everything down, but my voice was very monotone. I wasn't smiling at the camera. I was just doing my thing. And I didn't realize how much of an art form. Listen, I don't like Stephen A. I really don't like him when he's on his shows. I like Stephen A. when he's giving interviews on Bill Simmons and other podcasts. I do not like that style of you have to be brash. You have to be entertaining all the time. But I got it. Afterwards, at first I was like, oh, you don't have to be like that. That's stupid. But when you're not putting on a personality, when you only have 90 seconds or a few moments to really catch people's attention, you have to either be outlandish and really all over the place, or you've got to be really, really high intensity or bring your personality. And I just didn't know that when I first started.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking and just thinking about reporters and how this is a whole separate topic for a whole other day, but how reporting on, you're talking about Stephen A. Smith, and I think he was, I watch a lot of MMA, and the UFC recently changed broadcasters, and Stephen A. Smith, as you might know, he started to appear on some of I can't remember exactly which broadcaster it was in the US, but he got a lot of flack from the MMA community about his approach to reporting on MMA news, and but it was the broadcast aspect that he was coming with that angle, like you're talking about. You don't have to like it, but it's a skill to command attention for 90 seconds at a time. And there's a I don't know how much if you pay attention to the sport of MMA, but there's a former fighter, an athlete and commentator now and broadcaster, Chael Sonnen, and he's very similar, very brash, very loud. It's like 90 seconds at a time. He captures your attention, and it's a kind of love it or hate it kind of character. But I wonder if that's more of what we can expect from sports reporting into the future, because people are expecting this from other mediums. So I wonder if that's I don't know, maybe you need the balance. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's always, I think, and that's the brilliance of broadcast. And I know this is going way off, but like, I really, that it's a skill, and it's, oh my goodness, I love talking about that. But yes, I think it's going to go over into other sports.
Oh, interesting.
Chael only challenged for the belt because of his mouth twice. Like,
Yeah.
if he did not talk as much, he wouldn't have been against John Jones. But he
Mhm.
knew what he needed to do to press buttons to jump in front of people in line. Conor McGregor at the beginning of his career, he did the same thing, right? It's
Yeah.
it's these outlandish personalities, and you can see that also, even if you certain ones in basketball, not to that same extent, because I feel like Connor is so antagonistic. I don't think you get away with that in NBA or other
Mm.
sports, but that allows people to tune in and want to watch those fights. Like, everyone knew Connor was not going to beat Floyd Mayweather in a fight, like in a boxing fight. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. But no one could turn away from that car crash. No one.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
I think having a broadcast where you're having different types of personalities, like Perkins from that used to be a Celtics and now he's working for ESPN. He is so crazy, but Perkins was never like that. Perk was never like that when he used to speak. But he's going into this very stylized voice for ESPN right now,
Mm.
and
Interesting.
he's making waves. He's making waves, and I don't fault people for that if you're taking on the heel persona, like taking a wrestling term. But like, I think that you're going to see that more and more. If you look at the top shows on ESPN and Fox One in the U.S., they're the same combative type of two personalities.
Mm.
Stephen A. and Skip were there for years. Skip left and then had to get Shannon Sharp. Stephen A. now has Max. You always need a two different types of personality and then someone in the middle. Like, it's working over and over again. The only one that I've seen where they didn't put on a personality, but it was just them, pardon the interruption, with Tony and Michael Wilbon, they both came from sports writing backgrounds in the Washington D.C. area, so that's where I'm from,
Right.
and so that's
Yeah.
why I've always followed them my whole life. But if you look at them, they're not putting on a show. That's their personalities, but
Mm.
that's so rare. That's so rare for you to be able to do it in a punchy kind of 90-second or 15-second like blips of
Mm.
audio or video. You need someone to be outlandish. So I think it's slowly gone into other sports, but I think especially with more stuff like TikTok, Instagram, because
Mm.
people's attention span is so short. They just need those hits. They just need those quippy lines. So I think you're going to be seeing that over and over again in more traditional sports too.
Yeah, so I mean, touching, we're going off on a tangent, but it's completely fun because I'm enjoying this. You touched on so many things that I could talk about just individually on individual, separate episodes. I guess a couple of questions come to mind for me. So with the likes of Stephen A. Smith and Conor McGregor and Chael Sonnen and so forth, do you think, going back to kind of finding your voice and your brand, because they've essentially taught themselves into opportunities through an exploration of their brand. And as I'm thinking about this, you mentioned about maybe being chilled and monotone, and and kind of unlearning skills to become more yourself. Do you still think they're being themselves, but like amplified? Is brand a range as opposed to
Yes, yes.
a single direction?
I'm so glad you brought this up. So this is exactly how we train different ones to discover their voice and how we write for different brands. So okay,
Mm.
so I used to be a ghostwriter for athletes and different other brands. And the way that I was able to do this was a very specific way. And I never really, no one really taught me this. It was just kind of a mixture of different other like skills or different other, I don't know, mediums to find this out. But this is how it is. Um, I'm always looking for high and low notes, almost like music,
Mm.
high notes and low
Yeah.
notes. And you've got to find out a range of what excites people and it's high notes, what goes low notes. And when you
Mm.
have that, then you're able to build out your brand to be able to hit the highs and lows and then be able to almost double down on those kind of feelings.
Yeah,
And
that's really interesting.
so for instance, we do this. So I used to write a lot for just ESPN, but then for personal brands. And most people, when you try to have them like discover their brand, you're like, okay, tell me about your brand, tell me about your ethos. Like, they're just going to give you something scripted, or it's just they're just regurgitating what they hear or what they think that you need to hear. So what you need to do is actually you walk them through like really mundane. And first of all, I've never done this like a lie detector test, but I assume like you see it in movies. I assume it like how you had to have warm up questions.
Yep.
The same thing is you had to have warm up questions when you're trying to find out people's brands. And usually I'm just trying to walk them through like, tell me something about yourself. And I'm just kind of just doing quick marks on a paper to see like gauging what's happening. And then from there, I frame like, okay, so tell me about, when you came into this sport or came into this type of brand or when you discovered this type of methodology, right? And then you start seeing the eyes light up. They become a lot more loose on how they speak. And then you can start getting the cadence of the brand. And what I do is I make little marks on everyone has their own sayings or little endings like, you know what I'm saying? Or like, that's fire. You're looking for those little like connecting phrases. And that's part of the brand that we write into and how we do the advertising. And then what we do is kind of do a superhero analysis. They don't know that, but this is what we do. So everyone that we view as a personal brand is like a superhero. Every brand, if you love them or hate them, you know them like a superhero. You know their origin story, you know their superpowers, and you know who they save and why they're saving them. Every single one.
Yeah.
And like, if you can say any name, I can say the name The Rock, you know what he's been through. You knew where he came from WWE, you know where he came from, blah, 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 right? I can say
he's saving everyone, by the way. He doesn't stop. He saves everyone. That's why The Rock is a never-ending story.
That's exactly right. Oh my God, I love The Rock. I can't.
No,
I'm smiling right now just thinking about him.
yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, everything about his career there. Gary Vee, you know his backstory. You know he came over from the USSR. You know where he started baseball. You know baseball cards, collecting that. You know with wine library. Like it's clear, definitive stories to get you to know the person. And that's how we design a brand based on like a superhero. You know their superpowers, and even though just like Superman, you know he has a bunch of skills. But I mean, most likely, if you ask a kid, they know probably flying. They would probably say like 99% of the time, like Superman flies. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of testing out as you're fighting crime, as you're going out there. It's allowing brands to just do things and then you wait and hear the stories, how people describe them. And that's the magic of finding out their brand and how you resonate with people. Because I think the problem is a lot of times people will be like, oh, I want to be like this brand. I want to be like Gary. I want to be like this person. Listen, you're not going to be like him. You're not going to be Gary. You're not going to be this other person. And although you might have a certain skill set, the audience, your target demographic, is going to tell you if you're right or wrong, what they love, what they hate about you. And I mean, if you look at it, I mean, just an example, we keep going back to MMA, but like, if you, I gotta go on this small thing. Like, if you look at my track record, the one thing that I have is I can tell when a star is about to come out. I knew when Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey were at Strike Force, I was like, they're gonna pop. They're gonna pop. They're gonna transcend. I've done it in multiple. I've done this in the WNBA. I've done this in CrossFit. There's just certain type of ones you can tell their personalities, and it's going to happen. But if you look at it, Ronda Rousey, they first brought her in as the Golden Girl, right? All these things. But if you look at it, two things happen. Which, if you ask me, and she refused to do interviews about this, but she did not like how she was portrayed by the end of it. Look at when she was on Ultimate Fighter and how they changed her into a heel more. And people like Misha Tate more. Then when she got knocked out by Holmes, a whole myriad of things happened. But it was a problem because they didn't do the narrating right, and they weren't equipping her of what she needed to do and to go heel and all these things. Nick Diaz, totally different, right? Like Nick loves it. But if you're looking at that, that's because the storyline, the aligning of that, didn't match what was going to be happening. Rhonda is very emotional. She wears her heart on her sleeve. When you're dealing with a lot of female athletes, men and women perceive that differently, and they want heel style. versus if you look at more of a Misha Tate, Gina Carano, you look at their personalities totally different. Even though they're competitive, they're not like, I'm going to rip your head off style.
Mm.
And because of that, the narrative of the public totally changed. And I know I went on a tangent, but like I really think it's important for people to know it's you understanding and testing out storylines, but public opinion and how people are consuming your content will ultimately shape your narrative. So you have to be cognizant of what people are saying, how they're talking about you, and then are you going to be against that narrative? Are you going to lean into it, et cetera, et cetera? Your point,
Mm.
Kate, you were talking about Chael Sonnen. He knew what he was. He
Mm.
knew what he was, and that's why he's still relevant and still making money. People that do not want to double down on what people think or going with that, either you have to spend a lot of time, money, and energy to change your perception. That's why you have a PR agency, or
Mm.
you have to be able to ride the waves and understand what this is and what branding is. It's it's theatrics, it's theater. People want a different storyline. People want to see it. So how are you going to make sure that you use it to your advantage?
There's a lot of there's a lot that you've spoken about there that ties in with the high and low notes kind of concept as well, because I think it's a great tip for whether sports advertising. If you've got an athlete on your hands, and athletes are brands, you have to lean into the high and low notes of that athlete when advertising them, because otherwise the public will know when it's inauthentic. They will know if you're trying to present a narrative that is different to the high notes and low notes of that character. And you touched on some examples there with, maybe Ronda Rousey and her time towards the end of the UFC about how it doesn't quite match the public's view of someone, and there's something that feels maybe odd to the public. They can sense that in the person. And on the topic of I guess high and low notes and that concept as well, as you were talking about, and the range of character that you talked about, the kind of superhero concept and asking questions without the person knowing. Do you find yourself, you obviously, I imagine you get a lot of people inquire for your services, and then you have to go through this exploration process with them. Does it take you a while to break down some superficial answers to get that information from them? Or is that an easier process for you because that's just something that comes naturally to you and your team?
That's really funny. I used to think, I was like, oh, it's us and our team, and we're so good at this.
Mm.
After doing it for a couple years, I have this thing called the three path assessment, and it's in the 96th percentile like accuracy rate. It's a 3-minute test that they take, and
Mm.
after they take it, like I have done this. They take the 3-minute assessment, and then I do the hour and a half interview with them. It almost matches every single time. It's 96% accurate that I've noticed.
Right.
And so I wish I could say like, oh, it's us. No, no, no. It's data. It's these clear cut things that happen.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And is there, in terms of the examples of people that you've worked with that I guess find actually just thinking about one of the things I was thinking about just a moment ago is with the exploration, when you're going through the process of helping someone find their low notes and high notes, I guess you have to encourage people to, that is a comfort zone in effect. You have to, I guess, encourage
Mhm.
people to explore and the low notes and high notes. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes and sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable. Do you have to go through that process with a lot of the people that you coach?
Yes. You know what? Okay, so this is interesting, right? The reason I say like the assessment. So let me put it this way: the 3-minute assessment, it doesn't allow you to know the storylines of high notes
Yeah.
and low notes. It actually puts them in categories, one of three different categories, to explain how they can display their personality or their brand. And so it allows them to see if they're a showman, if they should be endorsing products, if it's just their personality. Are they more of a presenter? They can show their personality, but they really resonate with people when they teach someone a new skill. Or if they're an explorer, that's more of an introvert. Like they don't like talking to people. They like diving deep in a subject, creating a case study, a book, and then they're sending it out into the world, and they want to be known for that work. They don't want to connect
Mm.
with people. And so finding those kind of personalities, that's what the assessment does. To coach them through, like you were saying, to kind of get them to the right moments or get them through that, because it is awkward. It takes more than probably a half an hour at minimum. Some people, like, there are some that will just like spill their guts and just tell you whatever. They're open, but for the most part, they've got to feel comfortable. And sometimes I might not be the best fit for them. I might need someone else on the team to do it.
That's really important as well, I guess, is that like you said, the opening up to different personalities, that you might not be the best character, and to match, I guess, to break down the barriers for someone and get them to open up. That's really interesting. So sometimes in your team, you have different personality types matched with different entrepreneurs to coach.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So for the most part, we can all match, or everyone on the team, they're good. But there's a couple of things, like, I'll give you an example. Like, I don't really do really well with alpha males, and I'll tell you why. Number one, it's just not my thing. But I will tell you how it does work all the time with alpha males. If I have to work with them, I just don't like to. And I'll give you an example. Like, a lot of times, and this one of my friends, he knows that he's an alpha male. But anyway, like, I'll give you an example. Like, we'll all be sitting in the car. He'll have to have his legs in a certain position, puff out his chest, and he'll put his arms like spread. So he's like, "This is the dominant stance." I was like, "Bro, like, we're in an Uber. Like, I don't care about like put your hands." Anyway, so like that's the example. Like, so I ran into this a lot in sports, in really health and wellness. Kind of, I used to be in bodybuilding, not me personally, but
Right.
I used to work with a lot of bodybuilders. And what I found was a lot of bodybuilders, they were always trying to show that they were tough, that, nothing could stop them. And every time I was trying to talk to them about their brand, like, let's accomplish this, it was just straight lies. Or maybe it wasn't lies, but it was cognitive dissonance, where they couldn't admit it to themselves that this was not working. So what I had to do was, to get the deal done, to work with their brand, this is the same thing over and over again. Number one, I would have to not make eye contact. I would have to give a weak handshake and allow them to think that they were in a dominant stance. Because when they felt like they were in control, they would be more open, until I flipped it. So I'd have to, be really subservient, put my head down, shake their hand, pretend like, I couldn't make eye contact, mumble my words, right? So I'd be like, "Okay, we're thinking about doing this. Tell me about this thing." And then what I would do is, about 15 minutes in, I would make really intense eye contact. And I would say, "Okay, so break down how you're making X amount, or tell me how you're actually scaling this business." And having a change in control like that scares the crap out of them. And also, it makes them scramble and be real for a moment. Now, most of them usually try to lie. And again, it's a superiority where, I'm doing this is working X, Y, and Z. All right, well, show me the numbers. Okay. Oh, you're telling me this? Well, this is what's going on with your. Well, you know what? Tell me, you were talking about at the beginning how you started, bodybuilding. You told me it was actually because of a fight. So tell me, when was it that you were actually scared about this? Or this is what's going on. So when did you actually start taking HGH and steroids? I'm not putting this in a report. I just need to know, because if I'm building your brand, I actually need to know the honesty, how you're winning this. It's a very uncomfortable conversation. And again, could I do it? Yeah. Have I done it in the past? But it literally, I have to take a nap after those sessions. Like, it's so much work. I used to be a massage therapist, and one of the things they used to say was, it's like, psychologically, and I don't want to go too woo-woo on this, and like, people like, "Doc, like, it's not like," but if anyone has ever done anything like massage therapy, or any kind of work like that, there's something when you come in contact with someone that is really grieving and severely depressed, or dealing with cancer. And there's something that happens to you when you're that close to someone. Sometimes you almost burst out like you're crying. Sometimes you feel severely depressed. And it's literally like feeling like you're taking on someone's aura or spirit. It's very, very interesting. there's nothing that you can describe. It's when you're doing the massage and someone's holding back or they're so angry or so sad, you can start feeling it. You feel it in the tense of their muscles. You feel it, everything that you're doing for them, the body work that you're doing, you can feel it. And the instructor I used to have, he was like, you've got to almost imagine yourself like a tree and don't let your roots down. You have to be more superficial, because if you let your roots down, you will start getting very emotional with your clients. And
Right, interesting.
and I found that it's been true. I found it in body work, and I find it with brands. When you're talking about someone's personality, how they perceive themselves, you're dealing with their life, their trauma, what they find, their goals, all of these things. And you have to balance yourself out. You have to let your roots down a little bit to be with them in the moment, but you still got to be objective enough to pull back and to be able to pull out the right moments and the right parameters for that brand. So it's as much of it is a science. It's really an art of your balancing out to find that voice.
Yeah, it's funny, as you're talking, the two words that come to mind to me, which are, I guess, conflicting words. We've got a kind of candor, so the ability, to be blunt and to be honest and heart on sleeve, but in a really open way. And then sensitivity, the completely opposite side. And when those two things come together, I guess it can be really energy draining. But also really valuable once you get to the end of it. But like you said, maybe you need to take a nap after going through that process with a lot of people, and they probably need to take a nap too. I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine that's how they feel. But it's a fascinating skill, and just thinking, I mean, it makes sense to me speaking to you and you being in the position you're in. It's no accident. You've been through several different careers. I'm thinking about, journalism and writing in some form requires that ability to break barriers, find the story, find the insight, and it requires you to ask tough questions. And then on the flip side of that, you've got massage therapy, which is that direct one-to-one connection and requires a sensitivity. So it's kind of you're a hybrid of those, I guess, those two personality ranges that come together in this kind of unique ability to then help break down people's vision and I suspect expectations as well. Because I imagine, actually, that's an interesting question. Is I imagine there are times where people come to you with their vision, maybe for a company, maybe an idea, and I don't know. There must be some people whose expectations you have to manage alongside their vision, because you don't just want to be a yes man and say that's a perfect vision, I can definitely help you achieve it. There's got to be some moments where you work with people who, I guess, you give them a dose of reality maybe as well, and that must be really tough.
Yeah, and that you're exactly right, because that's very conflicting. Because in one session you're doing an audit and you're trying to show them what can work, and then you're doing a section of let's go build this. And a lot of times after they appreciate the honesty, but then they're like, I want to do something else. And that was at the beginning of my career with this. It was really hard because I would tell them something and they're like, yeah, doc, well, thank you so much. Thank you for your honesty. We're going to do this. And before I would just be like, yeah, but they're paying me to do this. I know this isn't the best way, but I'm there for your marketing. Let's do it anyway. And that was the real turning point, because I was working with, I remember the moment. I was working with a personal brand, and I kid you not, they could have been the biggest in their industry. No, like, I have unequivocally, they were going to break out. They were going to break out. They were the best in class. The people that they worked with were top notch, world class.
Can you say what industry? I'm just curious.
Yes. So the industry was professional sports. They were a therapist, and they were world class. And I told the person, hey, you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to do this storyline, and this is going to be your second act. Like, so the professional never named their clients, right? So they were always brought in as that secret weapon for teams. So if you like in any sports, and if the audience, if you're in sports, major league baseball, football, basketball, whatever, you have a team doctor and you have a team physician, you have a team everything, right? But this person was so good, they knew in the industry they would call this person. Now, the dangerous part of this, like for an example, if anyone's heard of like the NBA, like the 76ers, the 76ers are notorious for jacking up their athletes. like they would get really highly regarded athletes. If anyone knows like Ben Simmons, right? Ben Simmons, he started weightlifting, he gained a ton of weight, and he broke his foot. Couldn't play his rookie year. Okafor, Joel Embiid, like they are known for getting really talented rookies and jacking up their first part of their career.
Mm-hmm.
It was at that caliber that this person could come into a sport and be the main physician that would fix the athlete. Now, the issue was most teams did not want to acknowledge that their house doctors couldn't do it. So it would almost be in a shroud of like in the night kind of calling this person, right?
Right, interesting. Yeah.
And I was like, listen, you've got to, first of all of your athletes that you work with, if you ask them for a testimonial and show it after the season, show them after what you've done with their career, show them before and after what you've done. And one thing, the person would never, ever ask their main star athletes to do an on-film testimonial or talk about the before and after, even seasons after. I was like, this is, all of these people are taking up your space by saying they're great and they're not. And they know they're frauds because they're, and they knew that that person wouldn't talk. So they're touting that they're the best physician at this team. And I'm like, listen, there's nothing wrong with this. This isn't conflict of interest if you're doing it after the season. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The other thing was they had a great personal story where people don't want to talk about this. It's similar. An athlete just talked about it last year, but physicians and therapists are the same way. Most athletes are severely sleep deprived by the end of the season by all of the time zones that they're going into, but also most therapists and physicians are severely either self-medicating or just slowly going into severe depression because of they're just running themselves ragged. And this one individual that I was coaching, they were losing all their hair. They were like, tons of things was happening. And I was like, listen, go out and let people know, like, this is what's going on. You're going to create a full academy of teaching your methodology and get people certified under you. Get people to know that you're the best and then release your own certification. That way you're not traveling around all the time. People have seen your pedigree. You've been in this space for decades. Like it's going to work. The person wasn't ready to be vulnerable until all of the things that they were going through. Wow. And they refused to get the testimonials of the top athletes. And so to this day, I wasn't courageous enough to push for it and to say, like, if you don't do this, I won't work with you. It was too late. It was too late because I pandered to them too long for them to feel like they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I still regret that. That's one of my biggest regrets with this whole thing. That was like, I have no doubt they would be set for the rest of their life. Their grandchildren would be set if they just did what I asked. But I was trying to play both sides of the fence. I was trying to show them, like, this is what your personality, these are the storylines, go off and do what you want. And that's why afterwards I was like, okay, screw all this. Like, I'm not listening to any of this. Either I know what's working, I know what's happening, I can show you the clear markers of why it's going to work. And by the way, someone later on, years later, came out of the woodworks like, I'm dealing with this, I'm drinking all this stuff. Guess what? That person got praised. They're not even a tenth of as good as this person. Mm-hmm. And people follow them because they're like, oh, you brought up personal, your health and wellness, all this stuff. Don't even
I mean, you were talking for about 3 minutes there, so I don't know about not getting you started. It's about
just shut it down. Just cut it off. Cut it off.
It's about shutting it down. Cut it off. I mean, just hear me. I mean, what's there's so much interesting to so I guess so many layers to what you were just talking about. But I think you have to go through, just in terms of in the marketing space, you have to go through experiences like that to improve the next time. And so even though that's it's a regret, and it's something that until you address, it weighs heavily on your conscience, and then you don't have the peace to move forward. There's nothing worse being in the marketing space and working with either, I guess, not being true to yourself and your brand, and use the word pander, and that's something that I personally hate. I can't stand pandering, because I've either put myself in a position where I've pandered for so long that I can't get out of it, or because, I mean, just you talked about the alpha male situation, just egos in marketing, in the creative space sometimes, and having to pander to them, it just takes the energy and the enjoyment out of it for me. So I mean, that's a fascinating example of a big lesson learned, and I imagine that even though that's probably not the nicest experience, and you said you regret it, it's probably helped you tremendously with the rest of your clients move into the future after that point.
Yeah, it's totally changed everything that I did. Everything. So from that point, if people want my help, first of all, I basically productized everything to be into courses. So I don't work with everyone. They have to take an assessment if our team's going to work with them. But we still give people the tools if we don't feel like we're the best fit for them. And so we're like, hey, guess what? Go through these exercises with your team. Write this stuff out. And you're going to come to the very close conclusions like we did. It's going to happen. But that way, you can live with the clear evidence and do whatever you want with it. You don't have to listen to it. You can keep doing what you're doing. It's going to probably give you short-term success, and you're going to bottom out because you're putting on a mask. But if you want to go down that route, now we don't have to have that. We don't have to have that. We don't have to have those fights. We don't have to constantly be at each other's throats about doing this thing. Like, just go do it. Go see what happens. But if you do listen to us, and we have, tens, if not hundreds of examples now with our clients and now with our students, like it's just a very strategic observation of what you're doing and you moving through time and space and then reverse engineering it, and then you're going to get results.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, actually, just as you're on the topic of your company and how you work, the thing that I really liked just going through your website is I like forgive me for forgetting the phrases, but it's done for you, done with you, and then something else. Maybe you can remind me, but I really like that approach. So, if you've liked what you've been listening to do today, and perhaps you've got a vision, a brand, and actually just an interesting point, do you work with companies who maybe are well-established brands, but maybe they want that PR angle to rebrand? Do you face those certain scenarios as well?
Yes. Yeah, those are, we always like, let's do an assessment. Let's see if it's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, finding your voice, if it's a bigger brand, the only issue is with bigger brands, we have to have more masters, right? More boards of like getting the cosign, like, and so I'm more apt to say, hey, let's do a mind mapping session with your marketing team, and then you take it from there. Because I've been in situations where it's like every month I'm fighting just for me to do my job. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't light me up to do that. I'm like, let your marketing team do the fighting. Like, if you just want me as a consultant, but I'm like, I feel like being through so many startups and being with so many bigger businesses too, I think I've aged like 40 years in like 7. And I'm just like, let someone else do it. Let the young kids do it. Like, I'm too tired for this.
Yeah. If you're taking naps after every interview, so they've got to know where. Yeah, you got to rely on the youth.
Never joking.
That's one thing. I'm just curious before I move on. There are a couple of other elements of the Brand Factory Inc. that I'm curious about. But actually, just going back to the topic of alpha males, it's something I've written down, and we didn't really get into VaynerMedia. But I am I find it fascinating in terms of speaking to you, because I imagine, and again, do correct me and talk through this, but I imagine that there's a massive attraction there to Gary Vee and Gary Vee's content, because it is live, it is video based, he's been doing it for a long time, it is kind of shaky camera, he is the kind of person because I've followed him for maybe 10 years in terms of books and stuff like that. And so I've seen the progression into what I now see as kind of a more polished, it's kind of a more polished output, but still with a little bit of a shaky cam feeling at times. It's really hard to describe, but having seen his progression over time, it's been fascinating. But at the same time, I don't check in with his kind of content every day. I'm not addicted to it. And the reason for that is because I see him as a kind of an alpha male character who it doesn't really always resonate with me. I find it quite irritating. And so on one hand, I admire the content. I'm fascinated. I don't know how he has the energy or team to put that stuff together. And on the flip side, I find it kind of fascinating but energy draining to have him there all the time. And almost, I think Gary Vee represents something that's kind of irritating but fascinating to me at the same time. Is that you have to be everywhere all the time, and I just don't have the energy or I don't know what it is. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's not something I enjoy. I think I enjoy specific mediums and kind of putting my energy into one medium. At the moment, that's podcasting. Historically, it's been writing a bit more. So yeah, I'm curious your opinion on Gary Vee, given those things and what you've talked about. Where does your opinion lie?
Yeah, that's interesting. First of all, I think Gary's. I think we talked about like high and low notes. I love seeing throughout the last 10 years. Like Gary's style has really changed. I feel like Gary was a lot more brash, almost like 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
When he was really on conferences, used to swear, used to be all this high energy. Now, if you looked at it, listen, he's his team and he's a master at his own narrative at this point. But look at how he's changed with being grateful, gratitude, right? That was really a transformation almost over 2 years, because if you look at it, I think about it, he was trying to tear down the system. Then he was telling people to hustle, hustle, hustle. Then he was telling people what they needed to do and how stupid they were to just not starting right now. And then he's done this overarching gratitude arc in his marketing. And I think number one, I'll be honest, his core team, I think that's one of my favorite core teams I've ever interacted with or worked with, hands down.
Wow. Yeah.
They are very welcoming. They're just. I find that when I'm working with a lot of marketing firms, they almost feel like they're putting on airs. Like they're like, first of all, they don't want, if I'm a contractor with a bigger marketing firm, they want you to always know that you're a contractor. And they're like, we do this, we rule this. I find a very almost like zen or peace when I'm in the office with Vayner. And what I like about that is, now this is, and I would like to do this like the tier system, his inner team is like that. I find that and this isn't the problem with it. It makes sense. They have a very high turnover rate, very high. And so I've worked with them for several years. I've only worked with 3 people like throughout that entire tenure. Everyone else, when I go into the office, they are gone.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this to like, tear down or I can't believe Gary's doing it. But when you were talking about being all over the place, I knew multiple people. They would go as an intern. And after 4 months, like perfect example, I remember one person, he used to be like some type of yoga Zen master. I'm not making this up. Like this is what he called himself. I did not call him himself. But I remember he was an intern for Gary and he's like, I'm going to go through the ranks, all this stuff. He worked there for 4 months. Now, this man cared about his nutrition when he came in, all this stuff. I saw him 4 months later. He had gained like 30 pounds. He was sleep deprived. He's like, man, like I got to refine my center. They will run you to the bone until you die.
Wow.
I can't say that's wrong because Gary's not pretending that it's not busy. But guess what? They take turns on all of the videographers with him. Like D-Rock is in control in edits, but I have been with him for multiple parts of the day where they're exchanging people almost like workhorses to just keep up with Gary.
Yeah.
I think Gary... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you carry on.
No, I think his energy is I think he's a one in a generational type of personality like that. And so when he talks about hustling, and I think obviously, I mean, he's mentioned it in many documentaries. Like he did Daily V because people didn't believe that that was how Gary really lived and operated every day of his life. And so he made it another section after the Ask Gary V show. And I don't see that being a problem. I think that it's a very unique skill set in what he wants to do with his life. And the problem that I feel is when he was saying, hustle and all these things, that goes into the startup mentality. And most startups fail, and most people burn out, and they're not balanced, and they don't do a business that has longevity. They're either you've got to be a unicorn or lifestyle businesses don't exist basically. And I feel that his style does promote that, or did for a long time promote that, like go 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 or you'll die like mentality.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's healthy. I understand why they do it for Vayner, and they don't do any outbound leads. They don't have a marketing department. It is Gary. It is Gary. I don't think many people are equipped to do that. And so what I say is I love being around him. He's one of the nicest guys. Like if you see him on camera, like that is how he is on and off camera. I will also say he's always on camera, so I've never seen him totally off camera at every time we've been together. But it's that the purpose of like being everywhere, and we actually worked with Vayner last year. I created the Gary V content model 2.0 to show how Gary has 30 people on the Gary V team. 30 for his personal brand. And I don't think most people have the money nor they just don't have the money nor the talent to be able to sustain 30 people working for their personal brand. But with the 2.0 that I created was we took Gary's model, but put purpose and type of content on top of it for people to work in a more structured way with purpose.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And then on top of that, we added automations in the back end. So I use a bunch of different tech that when I'm on a live stream, I can do hotkeys where I already can do timestamps. And when I put it through the tech that I use, it already breaks up all the pieces to be micro content based on the timestamps.
That makes sense.
So
it's a bit,
yeah. I mean, you're just working
being efficient with your time, being resourceful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think now there's a whole other way of checking your metrics and where you want to be if you're trying to be everywhere. But I mean, what I'm saying is, I think what people are missing with Gary is, I think people are missing how to think and use what Gary's saying as transferable skills or transferable things you can use in your business, not emulation. And I think people emulate him too much where they're making their content that looks just like Gary. If I could take a shot every time I see people like use the cursive version of their name at all of their micro content, and people say, oh, you're doing what Gary Vee does. See, that's the problem. When people are associating it with Gary Vee, they're not associating it with your brand. You messed up. In fact, Gary loves that. Gary doesn't say it, but Gary loves when people are emulating him because guess what? You're attributing it to Gary, not your brand. And so you have to figure out how you can be disruptive in a way that uses the principles that Gary does, which is, guess what? The micro content, the Gary Vee content model, that's the same model that shows in movies have been using for the last century. Movies create a long form piece of content. They create trailers. They go on PR tours. They have actors from the movies. That's what he's doing as a one-man band. So that's and he talks about using things from the past as a marker to do things from the future. So that's why I've always been attracted with Gary. That's why I've always loved what he's done. And that's why I've always strived to work with their team and him in different projects. But one little thing I would like to mention, though, the way I ended up working with Gary was the same way I worked with everyone else, ESPN and everything. I never pitched the big dog. Everyone tries to ask Gary for a job. Gary doesn't make those decisions. Gary has a team that does that. Everyone pitches Gary. I pitched his brother, AJ, which is the co-founder. And that's how I got in with VaynerMedia first. I got in with Vayner Sports, did a good job, and then we did other projects. So I really think when it's branding, going all those different things, you have to pick out the areas that there's always a void in the space. You have to fill those voids, and you're going to be able to get a lot faster, a lot quicker than trying to align yourself with, okay, Gary, Russell Brunson, Tony Robbins, all these things. Like tons of people are pitching them. Talk to Tony Robbins' CMO. Does anyone know that person's name? Like the COO of what's going on. Like that's how you're going to be able to display your voice, do what you need to, and get in alignment with some of these brands.
That's that's a fascinating insight into working with VaynerMedia and Gary Vee. So thanks for, I guess, sharing that extent of information. And you mentioned, so I'm actually just tell me whatever you're comfortable with. So what capacity do you help them with in terms of your business and historically?
Yeah, no worries. So I'll tell you the timeline. So first it started with, number one, all I wanted was, I was like, I got to get in VaynerMedia. When I first started, I was like, if I get a picture, like I'm done. I don't have to do anything else. And so the first part was Vayner Sports. I did an interview with AJ Vaynerchuk. I took a job at a sports magazine because I knew if I was writing for them, I could leverage that to get into Vayner Sports. So I said, can I do the cover story for Vayner Sports for this outlet? I did this even before like Vayner Sports even officially launched or signed their first athlete, really. And it took like almost close to a year to get the interview. So we went in there, did a micro documentary of just going to Vayner, and we did a whole tour, built out tons of content. Then the second time, Gary's one of his either friends or someone, they were in the DMV area, so they were out of Washington, D.C. They wanted us to produce a podcast because they saw us already at Vayner. They're like, hey, we want you to go in. We want to do a day in the life talking about, because they were interviewing Gary for their podcast. So we got hired to do that. Then afterwards, the 4Ds, which is a one-day conference or a one-day training for different brands with VaynerMedia, we got invited to that. Then the Sasha Group, which is helps like small or mid-size businesses. I can't remember how much they have to make. Either they make 10 million to like 50 million a year on revenue, whatever. So we started working with them because they were helping companies. Okay, so let me put it this way. There's a difference. Well, after 4Ds, you can go to Sasha Group. After Sasha Group, once they scale your business so large, you'll become a Fortune 500 or in that range. Then you go to VaynerMedia, where then they're working with the Bud Light, the Speedos, everything like that, right? So when you're in the interim, the smaller mid-sized companies, a lot of times you cannot get the same exact team that VaynerMedia would give you, because again, that's not the same contract. So there would need to be companies that would need to know how to podcast, how to create a podcasting team, SOPs for podcasting, SOPs for live streaming, and that's what we did for them. And then after we created the SOPs and created their setups for podcasting for those companies, then COVID happened. And I was doing live streaming with Build With Me, my new project, and they asked me to come back and teach their new company or their new entity under VaynerX, which is called Stork. They asked me to come in and talk about live streaming and teach people how to do that.
That's a really good transition into an area that I wanted to talk about. I'm conscious of time.
I'm good, man. As long as your time's good, I'm good. But, you don't have to keep going on. Cut me off,
No.
Just
no. I was conscious of your time more than anything. There's so many different tangents I can go on. But maybe if we close out this episode, maybe talking about, I think in terms of finding your voice, we've talked about the methods that you take. Again, in the show notes, we'll link to your website, your content, and you can drop some URLs at the end of the episode as well. So you can find all of Doc's content and the Brand Factory Inc. As I was kind of exploring your content and thinking about this episode, I kind of could have gone in several directions, and one was about branding and voice, and there's this whole other stream which is the live streaming aspect, which we've only really just touched on. But maybe if you want to close up the episode talking about this project that you're working on now. And for me, I'm just fascinated by your goals with live streaming, it seems to be taking a life form of its own for you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So the show is called Build with Me, and this really started because in my past life I was a CTO for a company, and it was a fitness brand that was combining CrossFit and the UFC. So if you can imagine that, it was an event where it would be weight classes, and you would just basically exercise one on one against someone in a giant ring, and it was like you were at a fight, but it was fitness, no joke.
That
And
sounds great.
so I did that like 5 years ago, and they needed someone to learn how to live stream. Now this was like 2015. Facebook just announced they were going to let the stream key and the API allowed. So
Yeah.
I did that, but it was more than 5 years ago, and live streaming just wasn't where it is right now. So what happened was, in this project with COVID, and we were working with clients, and understandable, everyone was fearful, and obviously the economy, it's still the jury's still out what's going to happen the rest of 2020. But
Mm.
what I kept seeing was, and it kept annoying me, on LinkedIn, I would see ones that are making 7 or 8 figures constantly be like, "Oh, we'll make it together. We'll make it." And first of all, I hate generic phrases like that. And
Mm.
I was more mad at them. And I'm like, first of all, I don't have your net every year. I don't have that net revenue. And you're telling me to hold on like you don't know me. And I kept
Mm.
getting more and more angry. And then I realized, like, wait, you know what I could do? Let's just see what I could do instead and stop being angry. And I was like, I'm going to just live stream every single night for 40 nights. And I'm going to take one tech tool, and I'm going to teach people live how you could create 3 businesses with that tech tool. So ones that are pivoting, or ones that are worried about the economy, or worried about what could they do next. I'm going to show you
Mm.
step by step, and I'm going to stream from the unboxing of the product to me launching 3 different businesses every show. I'm going to show you how I would go about and start making money that night. And so that was just the live stream of doing that. I thought it would be, interesting, and I'm constantly doing things with AppSumo and reviewing tech anyway. I was like, it's pretty makes sense like that. And as I was doing that, it was less about like, Doc, help me with my business or launch this app. It was like, I want to do live streaming. I want to learn how to get in front of the right audience, and it kind of took a life on its own. So afterwards, I had always tried to launch courses years before, but I just never had the right product market fit. And
Mm.
with everything going on with COVID and people trying to pivot, I was like, I've always had a vision to disrupt online education, specifically with marketing education, because I find that most of it is trash. And I was like,
Mm.
I'm going to give away most of it for free, for high end or very specific, like you need intensive help. We're going to have incubators. We're going to have advanced courses. But I mean, it's shown episode after episode. Like, if people just watch the free show, people make money every single night with these shows. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
And are you so are some of those videos still available, or are you in the middle of some streaming that still?
Yeah. So all of them are available. So I did the 40 days straight, and then I almost like crashed. But yeah, so now I just do a weekly show. So it's a weekly show at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and if they go with Build with Doc, buildwithdoc.com, they'll see all of the past builds. So I leave them up for free. They're on my YouTube channel. Anyone can watch them. And then I was like, you know what? If it's the right time for them, I'm gonna do different courses. So right now, everyone has different things, courses, all this stuff. I was thinking, I think I was with my nephew or something, and it was nephew and then other kids, and I was seeing how they were playing with Lego sets, and
Mm.
what was really impactful, like these 2 kids had just done an 1,000 piece like build for this Lego set in like 3 days, and I was like, that's amazing. Like, how is that possible? And it's all a game, and that's the main thing that I see with most online courses. I find that a lot of people don't finish them because they're not incentivized, or I feel like they're just not fun enough. So I was like, I'm going to create something called minimal viable builds, so MVBs, where
Mm.
just like kids have instruction manuals and have little projects, I want to do something like that. So that's the
Yeah.
next mission of, although they're going to be online courses components, they're going to be titled MVBs, because just like certain Lego sets or what you're building, I want to have different MVBs. So the first one we're releasing in July is going to be like pick one. So tons of entrepreneurs that are new or ones that are scattered. I've been there where you're trying to launch like 7 things you don't know what you need to focus on. It teaches you what you can do, like pick one idea. So that's why it's called pick one. But the commonality out of all of these things, it still comes back to live streaming. I found that myself and clients have had for years, it's always been a heavy component of showing up live and doing some kind of live component. So I'm like, that I'm going to show people step by step that this is possible and this is what we're trying to do. So this started off, and one last thing, I'll stop on this. The reason it was perfect timing of like COVID and everything like that, but the other component was I was working with streamers on Twitch and other things, and they were constantly yelling at me that, Doc, I didn't understand the structure. You couldn't pay. You couldn't do all these things. And I was like, I'm going to start my business from scratch, live streaming, and then from there, show you all of the multiple streams of income that you could be making. So that was the inspiration of the show, and yeah, that's how we went.
And are you simulcasting to multiple platforms? Are you sticking to one platform?
No. So I use Restream and Restream.io, and then it's you can go on multiple platforms up to 30 at once, even with their free plan. So that's what I do. I'm on Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, and by the way, shout out! I put this up on Twitter today. I was like, I'm the #1 business show on Mixer right now. And
nice.
It's great, but Mixer is shutting down in 3 weeks. So Microsoft is totally shutting down all of their department. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it's like it's a false trophy.
It's bittersweet, yeah.
But yeah.
On that, do you just being in the live streaming space? I don't know why. Do you think there will be an end to kind of simulcasting at some point with each platform wanting exclusivity? That's something I've been thinking about. I'm not really in the live streaming space myself, but it's something I've just spotted and thought, maybe the platforms will try and stop that at some point.
You know what? It kind of depends. I mean, Twitch has done it with their partners. So if you're a partner at Twitch, you have exclusivity. Now you could do, videos or your VODs, video on demands on another platform, but all their live streaming content, you are bound to them. I think that it's going to depend on the platform and their purpose. But I don't see that being. I see that being an issue for certain platforms and what they're trying to do. I have no. It would be great if I was a Twitch partner, but the thing is, it actually works for my benefit being on multiple platforms because I'm not even just trying to be on YouTube. What I do is when I get invited to do a live stream, so to get all of my lead generation, or a vast majority, I pick out a community, a Facebook community, a SaaS platform that has a community, and I'm like, hey, I'll review and show people for free how to really use your product. And I'll use a case study because I have a marketing agency. I've done all these things. So it's a real life case study, but I ask you, let me stream directly into your group. And then that allows me to capture a whole nother audience. I'm not asking them to sign up, but because I'm giving so much value, people sign up to my newsletter and then they're in my funnel. So for me, it actually works that way. I don't stream to every single platform all the time, but I'm very strategic how I show up. And then I'm quantifying that type of group that I'm showing up, and then going from there and expanding.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. Hey, Doc, you've been so generous with your time, and you just touched on a subject which, again, I could talk about for hours. But so I'm going to have to get you on for separate episodes about live streaming. But I was just thinking, as you were talking, with Twitch and the kind of generation of esports, whether you call them influencers, I don't think athletes is quite the right term, but it's esports. I guess there's going to be opportunities there for people like yourself and businesses like yourself to help those streamers turn into brands. It's already happening as we speak, but it's growing at crazy rates. So there's plenty of opportunity there for, I guess, branding agencies and brand developers to work with streamers. So that's a fascinating space. And again, esports and just streaming and that concept is something that I could talk about forever.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Absolutely.
maybe we'll get to that in another episode. So, and for now, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's been really enjoyable speaking to you, and you're giving so much insight. And I mean, things that I've taken away. There's one sentence that comes to mind, and it's, explore your low notes, explore the high notes, be comfortable with the range, but don't worry if you're uncomfortable or fail along the way, because the rock will save us in the end. So whatever you do, that it'll all be okay. You've been a fascinating person to talk to. Do you want to just give a shout out to any social media, any links where people can find you and download your content, anything? And again, I'll include all this in the show notes.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah, so they can find me at brandfactoryinc.com. That's our marketing agency. And then if you want to see some of the episodes, what we do, it's buildwithdoc.com. You'll find all of the almost 60 plus episodes at this point. We're going to be hitting episode 60 next week. And then I'm pretty much active only on one platform, which is Twitter. I know sometimes it's a dumpster fire, but I'm always there. It's _ Doc Williams, and I'd love to chat. I'd love to talk to everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and take care. This has been the Advertising Hour. Thank you.